Welcome to the Lovecars On The Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On The Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. For those of you that regularly tune into the video version of this, you might notice I'm in a slightly different place. I'm in a place called Qatar, where the World Cup of football is going on. But this is motorsport, and we're here to talk about aerodynamics. Has it ruined Formula One forever? We got a surprise winner at the Autosport Awards to go through. Jamie Chadwick finally gets a big break that everybody's talking about. So we're going into a bit of detail there. We look at Aussie Supercars, hold and bow out of Aussie Supercars. What a legacy that's been, and one of the best celebrations you'll ever see in after any race ever. But first, Tiff, you must have fond memories, but we got to say a farewell and pay our respects to Patrick Tambay as well, who sadly died really this week. Ex-Formula One racing.
We've been fighting the dreaded Parkinson's disease for several years, and he's only 73. Sadly passed. He was a wonderful, of all the French drivers, he was quite an Anglophile. He was quite calm, and he was a lovely, charming gentleman. But he was a part of this amazing batch of French Grand Prix drivers in the mid-70s and early 80s. They had this Pilote Elf. So the National Fuel Company had this massive chain of, encouraging from Formula Renault right up through to Formula One, sort of a bit like the Red Bull do now. And so there's this pack. I mean, I read the list, the pack of his colleagues that were in the 70s. There was René Arnoux, Jean-Pierre Jabouille, Michel Leclerc, Didier Pironi, Jacques Lafitte, who was actually more a BP-sponsored driver. And then, of course, the last one was probably Alain Prost. So we're talking about, 7 or 8 French Grand Prix drivers this whole thing produced. But Tambay had what I would call almost a perfect career, because he didn't go straight into F1. He finished second in the F2 Championship, I think, behind one of his other French things, behind Lafitte. So he went off to Can-Am in America, that wonderful old sports car. So he won the Can-Am Championship. Then McLaren gave him a couple of years of Formula One when McLaren wasn't the car to have. And then he went back to America in Can-Am again and won that. And then he came back. He took Villeneuve's place. When Villeneuve was killed, he was the driver that went to Ferrari.
Oh, wow.
Took that number 27. And I think he's actually a godfather to Jacques Villeneuve. I think Villeneuve was a godfather to his son, Tambay's son. And of course, he won his last Grand Prix. Yeah, Ali, it is, yeah. Won his last Grand Prix Imola in front of for Tifosi in the number 27 Ferrari. Then he went off, he did Le Mans afterwards, he did Paris-Dakar. So a wonderfully versatile driver that I'd love to see more of.
A bit like yourself, same age as well, which is scary, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's scary.
Slightly more successful than me, but a lovely, lovely man. And for him to get the dreaded Parkinson's is such a shame. But be fondly remembered, I think, by the whole motorsport fraternity.
Yeah, and he had a couple of pole positions. He had a couple of wins as well, a few pole positions, a couple of wins in Formula One. So a proper driver, and yes, slightly better than you in terms of success as a driver. He came over to Goodwood. I raced against him at Goodwood and would meet him there every year. So a real shame. So a lovely, lovely man. Yeah. Fond memories for you, I'm sure, and for hopefully our listeners as well. I didn't know much about him. I looked him up, and so it's very interesting to see what a versatile career he had. But respects to his family. Where are we going first, Tiff? We're going to
aerodynamics. Aerodynamic. I'm sorry, I brought this up on Twitter.
Formula One.
I think it's killed it. I mean, this all goes down to, I'll be interested in comments below. I want lots of comments on this, because obviously I want good racing. I think most fans want good racing. But if you criticise aerodynamicists and these, amazing cars that will go around corners with 10 Gs, stupid loads, and there's an element to the Formula One fraternity. They want free regulations. In which case, the driver would sit in a G suit and would just be going around on an automated, But it's because this all came out because Ross Brawn was interviewed in Abu Dhabi, because he's retiring from FOM, where he did these new regulations. And he says, I'm sailing off into the sunset, really pleased and excited with where Formula One is today. Well, Ross, I'm bloody not. And I don't think the majority of Formula One fans are loving the current state of these cars. Because Ross, of course, was given the job of coming out with these new regulations. because cars couldn't follow. They had to have DRS. And I'm fairly convinced myself that the whole idea that we got the impression of was that they were going to get rid of DRS. Ross Brawn come up with some formula that gets rid of DRS. Then when we first had that fond image of a mocked up future, this new regulation with those huge, wide, ugly front wings, I was in despair. When he said, get rid of DRS, bring ground effect back, I pictured cars maybe without any rear front wings, or maybe as in the 80s, just small little front wing each side. And yet, because the sort of ground effect that Ross came up with was this horrible porpoising mess of a thing, which okay, when Adrian Newey got it right with the Red Bull. I think Mercedes went too low. They tried to be, because ground effect is all about keeping your car as close to the ground as possible. And ever since that was introduced to motorsport, and Mario Andretti walked off with the 1978 Formula One championship, ever since that year, aerodynamicists have ruled the roost. And the problem is now all the rule makers and all the teams are owned or directed by aerodynamicists. So they're not going to give up their love and career. Like Adrian Newey's not going to say, if you said, let's have spec front and rear wings, which I believe would actually be quite a good thing to make racing better, the aerodynamicists that rule Formula One, they'd go mental. You'd never get it through. So,
yeah, but there's other ways there are other ways that they could excel if they had spec front and rear wings. There are other ways that they could excel with the flow over the car.
But we have to stop this dirty air. And, because Ross Brawn, Jenson Button won a world championship simply down to the fact that Ross Brawn found a little loophole in the regulations, got a double diffuser on his cars, and nobody else could compete. Adrian Newey's been brilliant this year. Nobody can compete with Red Bull because Newey's come up with an aerodynamic design. You remember we had fan cars to try and come up with to beat the ground effect. Then we had those cars that they had a ride height at a max to try and stop them being so close to the ground. And they had that ride height rule for a year. As soon as the cars walked out of the pit lane, they'd spring back down because they had sort of these double springs. So the pit lane, they're about 6 centimetres ride height. They're on the track about 6 millimetres. So, then Newey came in, he's read Adrian Newey's amazing book, it's a fabulous book about how aerodynamicists work. He's looking for little vortexes here and vortexes there, and your wing mirror will send a vortex to somewhere that he wants to move. So it's an incredibly, difficult science. But to my mind, it's what spoiled, if you look to pre-1978, you can look at early, mid-70s Grand Prix, you'll see the cars coming into the first corner, and there can be 8 different constructors in the first 10 cars. Competition then was unbelievable. Whereas now, as soon as your aerodynamicist gets that little clever tweak, everybody else is a nowhere man.
Yeah, I think. Look, I'm all for innovation, and I love the fact that every year the cars get faster and better, as you would expect them to. But the cars are far too big for me.
Why do you have to go faster? The faster every year.
Okay.
That was another thing. About 10 years ago, they came with this. We must have cars 5 seconds faster, and they actually said the Formula One fans have asked for this. Well, they didn't ask me, I can assure you, because when are all the best races?
You'd expect
the best races are when it's wetter, damp, when the cars are slower, harder to drive, less running on rails that the aerodynamicists create. That's when racing comes alive, when the aero is less important.
I think we'll all agree with that. But I'm for innovation, but the cars are too big, in my opinion. They're too big.
But that's because of the stupid hybrid rubbish. We've got to they're big because they have to have batteries, and that's the problem. So that's a second problem. But the point, we haven't even finished with this Ross Brawn thing, because then he virtually agrees that DRS is here until the end of these regulations. Well, that wasn't the idea, was it? You've talked about overtake. You have your stats, didn't you? Last week you said there's a record number of overtakes this year, and I pointed out, but they're mostly when someone pits and changes tyres or something. What I would like is a stat. How many overtakes were done on track with DRS and without DRS? I think it'd be about 95% with DRS and 5% without. That's the sort of statistic I want from you next week.
Yeah. All right.
So we talk about, then Ross Brawn talks about the 2026 regulations, which he's had a hand, although he's leaving now, so he's retiring, he's obviously had a hand in what's going to happen to the new rules. He's already saying, Well, the trouble with DRS is, we have to have DRS because there's dirty air, which I thought he was going to get rid of, but he didn't. So now we're talking about, apparently, the big thing for 2026 is active aero. So not going further away from it. We're giving the aerodynamicists even more. And apparently, 1 minute he talks about would have in the corners, you'd have more downforce, your active aero will kick in. And when you come to straights, you'd have less downforce, which would give more slipstream and maybe overtaking. But then he went on to say, with active aero, because they can control it, if someone's out in the lead by 5 seconds, they're going to take away some of his downforce. And they're going to give more to the car chasing.
Oh, no, please.
I'm serious.
Who said that? Where did you read that?
Ross Brawn in Autosport, flipping here, in this.
Wow, Autosport magazine.
The future F1. So, yes, we're not going to have less aero. And the aerodynamicists are going to rule even more. Adrian Newey is worth every single penny he gets paid because he's done such a brilliant job with it. I
guess the difference is, I mean, when you see these guys driving their Formula One cars and they're changing all the different modes on the steering wheel, but if a top sim driver can get into a Formula One car, and really the similarities are quite phenomenal, other than the fitness side of it. But you ask a top sim driver to get into a car from 25 years ago, and they would be 5 seconds lap slower. But now I guess that's the difference. The cars are much easier to drive. Yeah,
easy to operate. Yeah, I was. Get a Formula 3 driver nowadays. They have a half-day test in Abu Dhabi, and they're within half a second of the. As I talk about, Jim Clark will be 2 seconds faster than a very, very good driver. The driver is becoming less and less important, and the aerodynamicist that dominates it's ruining Formula One.
We had some phenomenal races.
You can put that in your title. To point out
Formula One ruined
on his Twitter.
No,
he always puts controversial things that I don't use.
Phil's. Phil is our social media guru.
Right, Phil.
Sometimes we don't get enough
views. Ruining Formula One. But you can put that with my blessing. And I don't because there's no escape. There's no escape. We're stuck with these modern things now till 2026. And then apparently we have active aero, and then someone will get a clever tweak and they'll win by half a lap.
Racing fans, remember the days where you'd see the drivers sideways in a Formula One car and just having to work so hard. That's what I'd like to see. It's too many driver's aids now.
That's why I love it. Anyway. That's why I love IndyCar. That is why I love IndyCar. I mean, there are some boring races in IndyCar, I know, but if you watch IndyCar, the cars are exciting. The drivers can, and obviously it's only one chassis, therefore nobody can get away with any big aero advantage.
Yeah. Okay. So there we go. So ruining Formula One is the title of this podcast. Let's move on to the surprise awards at the Autosport.
Yes. A week ago, I was saying Ollie Behrman must win Autosport. He was beaten the year before by Zach O'Sullivan, and then all of a sudden, Luke Browning, Autosport champion, picks up his £200,000 check. I just like to say at this juncture, not that I'm jealous, when I won the equivalent award, the Grover Award in 1976, I was given a £1,000 check.
What would that be in today's money? Do a quick sum.
I don't know. Only about 10, isn't it? 10,000. Certainly not 200.
£1,000 in 1976. What would that be worth now? Can you do it on your? We got a stat man here. Yep.
So Luke Brown, I'd said Ollie Behrman, because Ollie Behrman's had a fantastic season of Formula 3, and he's going Formula 2 next year. I thought, he's just so good, Ollie. I'm a huge fan of Ollie. But the good news about, I don't know Luke Browning that well, but I've followed that he won the Formula 4 championship and he won the GP3. Are you talking to him? You got the answer?
6,100, there or thereabouts.
6,000. So I've got £6,000. He's got 200. Anyway, so Luke Browning has beaten Ollie Behrman to this Autosport. And it's a fantastic experienced judging panel. So I really respect them. Derek Warwick leads this team of journalists.
Have you ever been on the judging panel?
I was very early on. So I did run in the very first one, Autosports. I did. So anyway, I really respect their opinion. And of course, Zach O'Sullivan beat Ollie Behrman to the title a year ago. And now Luke Browning's done it. So although I followed Luke Browning's, I know he won Formula 4. In fact, he beat Zach O'Sullivan in a very tense Formula 4 championship a couple of years ago. So the brilliant news is, if Ollie Behrman's as good as he is, but Zach's better, and so is Luke. We've got three most incredibly talented. That is the great news that Ollie Bearman being beaten means. The thing about why I didn't probably rate Luke Browning enough is I think sometimes the national series, you don't know how competitive it is that year. You've got 15 other kids. So you come, but whereas Ollie, of course, has been out in the international world, so he's winning Formula 3 races against the best from Europe. So sometimes it's hard to judge how good a driver is going to be when he moves up the ladder. But obviously, the judges, have been so impressed. Luke Browning is today's Autosport. So huge congratulations to Luke. And I really look forward to going to Formula 3. Because Zach O'Sullivan, first year of Formula 3, was in a lower team. He's now in the famous Prema team. So maybe we can have a lot of winning going on with these kids. So wonderful. Of course, other awards, the Autosport Awards, I bet you won't be able to guess. Who was the International Driver of the Year voted by the public?
Go on. Tell us.
Max Verstappen.
Obviously.
Exactly. What was the International Car of the Year?
Go on, tell us.
Might have been the Red Bull. And then shock, what was the International Rally Driver of the Year? They don't need voting. They don't need voting. Well, the world champion, Kalle Rovanperä. What was the International Rally Car of the Year? Of course, it was the bloody Toyota.
Well, who do you think's going to win it? Who do you think's going to win it?
Why do they have all this voting? They almost don't need to have those awards.
International driver, I think Max could come second and still win that anyway. Max could come fifth and still win that. He's so popular. Goodness knows why. But
it's not that popular in Britain, is it? But anyway, as a driver, we respect him. So anyway, the other two finalists, of course, apart from Luke and Ollie Bearman, were Jamie Chadwick and Louis Foster. And it's exciting to announce this week that Jamie's going to go off to America, where she's going to be up against the boys. She's doing I call it Indy Lights, but to get it correct, it's now the Indy NXT, because it's obviously got sponsored. So that's the Formula 2 series in America. And funny enough, Louis Foster, the other finalist, she's joining him in the same Andretti team. So they'll be teammates next year. So the two other of course, Louis Foster won the Indy Pro 2000 Championship, the Formula 3 series in America. So that's really interesting because now Jamie's going to be the same team up against a champion from a Formula below. So she's got a real test there to see just where she is ranked, as an overall racing driver. So that'd be really interesting.
Good for her because, we've been the first to point out that perhaps she's not quite as talented as some of the men and the males.
And doesn't want to. We thought she doesn't want to move up because she'll get beat.
Good for her. Yep. A big respect to Jamie Chadwick. Yep. And I don't care if she gets beaten or whatever, she's doing it. And she's doing it at the top level. So good for Jamie. Brilliant.
And doing ovals. People like, Ricardo
amazing.
Says, I quite like IndyCar, but don't want to do ovals. They're a bit oval, a bit dangerous. But no, she's putting right in there in the deep end. In the Indy NXT.
Well, that's absolute fantastic news and quite a nice little barometer actually with her teammates. So that'll be quite interesting. That little battle, how that goes.
Yeah, Louis did the sort of Formula 4 and Formula GB3 in England. And then the price of going to international Formula 3 was just too much money. So that's why he went to America to do this India. It's an interesting thing for young drivers that can't find these ridiculous budgets, for Formula 3 and Formula 2. So he made that decision to go to America. And apparently he had a bit of tonsillitis during the test. So he's got a bit of excuse for having a bad, but I'm sure wouldn't have beaten. Who knows? He could have won it.
Brilliant. We wish Jamie lots of them.
Yeah. And then there was some racing last weekend. So you're going to say.
I was going to say the best celebration known to mankind in racing was the Aussie Supercars.
That was the last round of the championship at Adelaide, that wonderful Adelaide track. I know it's a championship we should be talking about every week on Lovecars On The Grid.
It really is.
Because it happens overnight. It happens. Well, no, I suppose I don't know. And I just don't get to watch it because it's sort of, I like watching live motorsport and it goes on overnight. I'm not even sure where you can see the races in recording. We should look at it more. I think the fact we haven't got a British driver over there probably means we don't have so much interest. But it's fantastic racing. But of course, this was the last race of the Holden. Holden brand is gone. General Motors have kicked it out into touch. But it was won. It was quite a good story because the last round of the Supercars was won by Holden. And it was the first win for rookie Brock Feeney. So it was nice, a rookie winning in a Holden on the last Holden race. Next year, of course, it's a General Motors thing. Instead of Holdens, it's going to be Chevy Camaros. And the Fords are going to be Ford Mustangs. So it's very American. Camaros versus Mustang. They've got Gen 3. It's a new shape of car next year. But now the star, although Brock Freely probably had a very good podium, the star of the show, as you just mentioned, was Shane van Gisbergen, who won the championship. So they presented him with the championship trophy. He just went mental. Have you seen it? Have you managed to download it?
Yes.
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant.
Burnouts
he had a penalty,
donuts.
I think. Yeah, he couldn't. So he does all the burnouts initially, and he parks it up against the wall, which is what some Americans do. They do it in NASCAR as well, and it's all spinning full speed, so the wall's stopping it. And then he gets out of the car when it's throttle's still going, which had us all. I just thought, gosh, maybe the tick over on those engines is so high that it was able to still keep the wheels going. But the clue, if you look at the video, which one of the teams has now explained, because he's missing one shoe when gets out of the car. So he's taken a shoe off, jammed the throttle open to keep the wheels spinning, got out, stood on the roof, walked away from the car to pick up his champion's trophy, gets back in the car, does more donuts, waving the trophy out of the window until both tyres exploded. I mean,
that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought the tyres are going to explode and the car will go out of control or something on its own.
No, so amazing. I mean, they thought about it before, apparently. But when this guy, I keep on talking about McKay, he's 33 years old now, but it won't happen. But as a driving talent, I mean, I'd like to see him do that Race of Champions, which is they don't have him over. They should have him for that Race of Champions.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Mixed. Because he was a Formula Ford champion, and then there's nothing to do down except go supercars. There's no real pro single seater down under. So he went off to Aussie, left home in New Zealand, and he's been to Europe. He's won the Blancpain GT Championship. He went back into single seaters last year and won the New Zealand Grand Prix at a Toyota single seater. He had a go in the Rally New Zealand this year in a Group 5, not Group 5. What do they call it? WRC2 car, and finished third behind two rally drivers.
He's phenomenal driver.
Absolutely, a star driver that should have maybe come to Europe and done more. But you're lucky you got him down there. I know he's a Kiwi, upsetting you. Obviously, he's winning your championship and being such a superstar. But I thought that was the highlight. The highlight of the weekend was Shane van Gisbergen. I always pronounce it wrongly. Gisbergen.
Your pronunciation is a lot better than mine, so you can keep doing the pronunciations for these difficult names.
He'll be out. So he'll be in a Chevy Camaro next year, trying to make a hat trick of titles. He won the title last year, and he won it about 5 or 6 years ago as well. Very entertaining, Shane. Thank you.
It was
very disappointing. Ross Brawn, love you, Ross. Lovely bloke.
Ruined Formula One. It's ruined it. You heard it here first. Ruined it.
Aerodynamicists. It's a difficult word. I had to look it up about 5 times to spell it rightly on my script. Aerodynamicists ruin Formula One.
Thanks for joining. I'm going to the pool. Enjoy the weather wherever you are, and look forward to seeing you next week.
While you're out there with that ball kicking sport, I'm now going to quickly watch who wins the test match. I don't know. It's exciting.
It's tense. It's very tense.
Bye. I've got to go. Cricket. Bye.
See you. Thanks for joining. Cheers.